Hello, and welcome to a session of Close Calls with California Poison Control System. Today we're talking about wildfire smoke, and I'm joined by my two amazing colleagues. I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourselves. Go ahead, Serena.
Hi, my name is Serena Huntington. I'm one of the pharmacists here at the California Poison Control System. I'm actually the managing director at our Fresno Madera division, and I will let Dr. Rangan introduce himself.
Hi, Dr. Cyrus Rangan. I'm one of the assistant medical directors with California Poison Control.
And as always, I'm Dr. Ray Vora, Fresno Madera Division Medical Director, also with Cal Poison. Well, we've got a lot to talk about because our topic today is wildfire smoke. And I know, Cy, you are an expert in pediatric toxicology and also environmental health. You've got a really personal connection to these recent wildfires that we've had in California.
Sure. Yeah, I live in the Los Angeles area, and I was just to the west of one of the major fires that was occurring called the Eaton Fire. And so we actually had to evacuate. My family had to evacuate for about 3 days or so. And there were high winds and a lot of unpredictability going on and power outages. We were very fortunate that my neighborhood was not touched by the fires. But as you can imagine, this was quite a harrowing experience for many people, and thousands upon thousands of structures and homes were destroyed.
Indeed. Yeah. Very sad to watch. And we kept hearing about this term called the urban wildland interface. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, especially for people who might be at risk for wildfires?
Sure. Yeah. In California, we this is a phenomenon we've been noticing over the past several decades called the WUI, or the Wildland Urban Interface. And that basically means that we are building a lot of homes and neighborhoods essentially into areas where there's a lot of wild foliage, trees, forests, etc. So that when we have our traditional wildfires that may occur, we're also getting urban fires at the same time. And that phenomenon has been increasing quite significantly over the past several decades.
I think another general perception is that all smoke is the same, but I think the science really shows that that's not necessarily true. Is that right?
Very true. And I think especially because of this wildland urban interface, the composition of smoke can be quite variable and quite unique depending on the situation. When you think about just trees and other foliage that might be burning, it's mostly carbon dioxide and a lot of carbon-based products that you're going to find in wildfire smoke. But when you combine that with structures that are burning, now you've got a bunch of items that, in households like electrical equipment, plastics, and all kinds of other materials that are also burning. So plastic byproducts, a lot of off-gassing of various gases like formaldehyde, things like that, that will all be combined into the wildfire smoke and present a health risk.
Okay, so let's actually talk about those health risks. So how would you capture that? What is something that people have to look out for if they're ever caught in this situation?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the exposure to wildfire smoke or urban fire smoke, first, the bottom line is always be listening to your local responders and your local agencies who are giving advice about when to evacuate, and always do it on the mark that they say to do it. Never wait around and never think that, oh, it's not close to me yet, because these things are there for your safety. But the bottom line is that most of the exposure that you're going to get is going to be causing respiratory symptoms. And those respiratory symptoms can manifest in coughing, difficulty breathing, chest pain, or anything in between. In addition, of course, to eye, nose, throat irritation that may occur as a result of that exposure. Now, obviously, as you can imagine, people who have chronic disease, lung disease, heart disease, they're probably going to be more susceptible than most people, and of course, young children as well. But I think what's also important to know is that although most of the toxicity is going to be respiratory, prolonged exposure to a number of these toxins could lead to other problems, like even neurologic damage or cardiovascular damage. It's all because of the way that these toxins can generate inflammatory responses inside your body that then can affect other organ systems.
Okay, so that seems like more of kind of your acute, right? What happens if you get exposed? Is there anything about long term, right? That fire lasted, I don't know, a couple of weeks. Is there anything that they have to worry about long term in the future?
There probably are. And the reason I say probably is that this is an area where there's not a lot of great study and scientific data to support what is going to happen to you in the long term. There are some people who have academic institutions, for example, who have been looking at this issue across the country. And there are studies that are now being generated in the Southern California area just for this purpose to look at these possible long-term complications and permanent damage, possibly cancer that may result after the exposure to these fires. But right now, we don't have a lot of data to really predict how people are going to respond long term.
Yeah, and I think another long-term project in the people that are affected by these wildfires is just cleaning up some of the hazardous materials. What can you tell us about how that's going and what people need to know and what they can expect?
Sure. Depending on the zones that were affected by a fire, there generally is sort of a two-stage process. So the first stage is the removal of hazardous materials. That's generally conducted by the Environmental Protection Agency. Once that stage is done, then there's a phase two, which generally involves the Army Corps of Engineers cleaning up all of the non-hazardous debris and taking those to appropriate disposal sites and making sure that the properties are now potentially habitable again, so that people can actually return to their neighborhoods and return to homes if they weren't affected by fires, or potentially rebuild in areas where they were. But there is a whole other subset of people who may be living in areas that were not necessarily directly affected by fire damage, but they may have been affected by ash, soot, or debris that has landed and settled in and around their homes. And that can even move into your homes as well. And so we want to make sure that we caution people about that if it's a small job at home, you can actually clean up that ash and debris yourself, but make sure you're taking appropriate precautions, like wearing a good fitting mask, wearing long sleeves, long pants, closed shoes, gloves, and even goggles for eye protection to do those small jobs of cleaning that may need to be done around your property. But if the job is too big, make sure to call a professional to come and do that work.
Great. So when you're talking about masks, like this one looks like it is not just a face mask that you wear or surgical mask. Is there a specific type of mask that folks should go out and get?
Yeah, it's a great question. The bottom line advice that we generally give is that any mask generally is better than no mask, but there are some masks that can offer sort of elevated levels of protection, like an N95 mask or even what's called a P100 mask. And those numbers essentially mean 95% of most of those toxins are going to be shielded essentially from entering your respiratory tract in an N95 mask. And in a P100 mask, almost 100% protection can be achieved with a P100 mask. But make sure that mask is fitting you well. If it's got to be snug around your face and fitting the form of your actual face, and you don't want to share a mask with someone else because everyone's face is different. If there's a little bit of a gap in that mask, then the mask is basically rendered useless. So make sure that it's a good fitting mask before you actually start using it. In addition to that, there are some things that you can actually make yourself that are pretty good alternatives. There are air purifying systems that are once called the Corsi Rosenthal box, and there are YouTube instructions where you can build essentially your own air purifier where you have 4 MERV 13 filters that you put together with duct tape with a box fan on top. And this actually acts as a fairly efficient and cheap air purification system that you can use in your own home. And you can make as many of these as you want and put them all over your home to try to keep that air as clean as possible while the smoke and debris are about.
Great. Just to wrap up, are there any safety tips or key takeaways about wildfire smoke that you want to share with our viewers?
Sure. I think the key things here are, first and foremost, always listen to every instruction or guidance or piece of advice that comes from first responders or local agencies. This is for your protection, not for your inconvenience. So if they tell you get out, get out. Wearing, of course, a mask for respiratory protection from smoke, very important. Now, the type of mask that you wear, well, as long as you're wearing something, it's going to offer some protection. But an N95 mask or a P100 mask tends to offer sort of elevated levels of protection. But always make sure that the mask is fitting you well. If the mask has a gap in it, then it doesn't matter what kind of mask you have, you're going to be exposed to that smoke. And then in addition to that, if you're going to be doing any cleanup around your home, wear personal protection that includes wearing a mask, but also long sleeves, long pants, gloves, and goggles to make sure you're protecting yourself during any kind of cleanup around your home. But if the job is too big, get a professional to come in there.
Good words of wisdom.
Thank you. And for those viewers at home, if you have any more questions about wildfire smoke or really anything else related to things that can be in the air that you're worried about for you or your family, you can always call our toll-free hotline at California Poison Control at 1-800-222-1222. I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Rangan and Dr. Huntington for this session, and I hope you both have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.